Wednesday. You know what that means. Time for the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Book Tour. I'm your host, Maddie Margarita, here with Diana Pardee on tech. Every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., the Southern California Writers Association turns our Facebook page over to a new author to talk about their books and their work. This morning, we're pleased to have with us Marcus Nannini. Marcus is a lifelong history buff with a particular interest in World War II and the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. His first novel, Chameleons, an untold World War II story, was well received and earned a Best Thriller Award. His second work, Left for Dead at NIJMEGEN, did I get it right?
Very close. Close enough.
We're going to leave that up to you to talk about. Was named 2019 Nonfiction Book of the Year. And Sir Charles, Prince of Wales. Is that his correct title?
Yes. Owns
a copy. And his third work, Midnight Flight to Nuremberg, the capture of the Nazi who put Adolf Hitler into power, was released in the UK and the EU in 2021. Wow. Welcome, Marcus.
Hi, pleased to be here. Haven't seen you in a while.
So you write about a very interesting period in time in history. Tell us what it is about that particular time that inspires you or intrigues you.
The economic conditions in the world in the decade leading up to World War II always interested me as they molded the events and they molded the people who I write about in my books. And the attack on Pearl Harbor, for some reason, has always just appealed to me. I've read every book you can imagine on it. And particularly a photograph taken by a Japanese plane, clearly showing two torpedoes, one going to the West Virginia, one going to the Oklahoma, coming from a midget submarine, which until more recent years was totally dismissed. Now the Navy realizes, yeah, they found an unexploded torpedo next to the West Virginia, which was about 3 times larger than the torpedoes being launched by the aircraft. And the hole that was in the side of the ripped open in the Oklahoma was 38 feet wide, right through the torpedo belt. And that's why the Oklahoma rolled over. That led to me writing Chameleons, an untold World War II story, which starts with the attack on Pearl Harbor from the point of view of that midget sub. Then it follows the commander of that midget sub into the present day, as you start out with that attack, and then there's some men trapped inside the Oklahoma and they're pounding SOSs. And that's how that opening scene closes. Then it comes to the current day and they find a skeleton buried in the backyard of a little local lady, and it ties it to World War II and the attack on Pearl Harbor. So that then propels the book forward, and there's eventually the commander who survived the attack becomes part of the story as the great-grandfather telling his grandson his real identity and reliving his life starting in the late 30s up to the present. And then eventually, between the newspaper reporter trying to chase him down and the Navy trying to track him down, he is discovered. Yeah, but in the process, I set up a whole series by introducing certain characters that beg for more attention. But anyway, that first book wasn't my best effort, but at the time was the best I could do. And the publisher said, we really want it. And so I took it, and they did a nice cover job. They did a nice job with the layout. Their marketing was kind of half-assed, and their margins that they offered the bookstores were, once I found that out, I knew I wasn't going to renew my contract with them, because bookstores were complaining to me, they're only offering 40% and they don't take unsold books back. Well, the standard is 50 and an extra 10 or so % if you don't take the books back. They keep them. So that told me when the contract was over, get my rights back and I'll save it and rewrite it and go with it again later. However, that set me up as an established author. So when I wrote my second book, Left for Dead at NIJMEGEN, which NIJMEGEN is one of the cities that was subject to the movie A Bridge Too Far. So anybody's watched that movie would recognize that title. So I came across a individual lived near me. I was in Carefree. He lived nearby, who had a remarkable World War II story. So I think I ventured to his house 50 or 60 times over the course of a year and a half, getting this whole story down. But then when I had it ready, I think it was only a month before I had a publisher. And that book set up my new one, Midnight Flight to Nuremberg.
That is a great cover. Can you hold that up
Yes.
back a little bit? There we go. Yeah. Stunning.
Yeah. This is the subject of the book, Harry Watson. This is the man who put Hitler into power. He's the conniver behind the scenes. Although in all the World War II newsreels, you'll see him all around. But in any event, the point is, by having Left 4 Dead and NIJMEGEN out there, well received, it's still bestseller in Holland, and it's in all the bookstores throughout the EU. That made it possible to get Midnight Flight to Nuremberg published quickly. In fact, I sent out 3 queries on a Thursday. Saturday morning, 2 of the 3 had responded with contracts attached to their emails, already filled out with me in the book, and neither one even asked for a manuscript. So I talked to both and went with Pen and Sword in Yarmsley, UK, and they did a great job with it.
That cover is really stunning.
Thank you. They did a great, I mean, even the way the coloring, but I don't know if you could tell, but the coloring over here that blends into the Nazi insignia is picked up in the word "to," and it's subtle, but it draws the eye.
Wow. That's gorgeous.
Thanks.
I mean, when you look at that, plus the expression on his face, the
and
German gentleman's face, is like
his eyes are haunting.
the kind of eyes that follow you if you're in the bookstore saying, "Buy me, buy me." Yes. Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about that book. So these books are historical fiction, correct?
Historical nonfiction.
Nonfiction.
Yeah.
So when you did your research, talk a little bit about that.
Research is something I've done since I was a kid. By the way, for the record, this is Franz von Papen, V-O-N, Papen, P-A-P-E-N. He was, in World War I, he was a spy in the United States and got out of the country just as they were discovering his plan to blow up munitions plants in New York. Not a good guy. But anyway, back to your question. Research. I've had a knack for research since I was a kid and have to manually go to the library. So these days, having the communications we have now and the research is just so much easier. But research is, I have to research everything I talk about, everything I write about, and can't just go on the words given me by my subjects, because they're looking at something that happened 70 years ago, 75 years ago. And I oftentimes find slight mistakes in their memory, and I find whole new things that they didn't even know about. Even down to, if I'm going to, I put pictures. In order to put a lot of pictures in there, when I like to have a picture book almost. So there's 75 photos in Midnight Flight to Nuremberg. And each photo is relevant to the story. So if he's flying a type of plane, if he's flying a trainer, picture of it is there, and then there's always a little bit of a story about it. In some ways, Midnight Flight to Nuremberg is a little overly detailed, but I tried to do it in a manner that keeps the story going. And apparently, based on all the reviews and the awards so far, I accomplished that. What I like to see in a review is one thing: they felt like they were in his shoes or sitting in the co-pilot seat with him. That's what I like. And that happens in both of my nonfiction biographies. Then there's usually plaudits for the research. That makes me happy too. Anything else, I don't care so much. I'm happy, but when I recognize the research and putting the people into the story, then I know I did my job. Because like in the first chapter, Midnight Flight, first chapter was actually chapter 2. They wanted me to put an action chapter first and then go back in time. Well, that sounds easy until you realize, oh my God, now you got to introduce somebody right off the bat who's already had 100 pages worth of storytelling. And so that took some time. I think I went through the first chapter 50 times. Chapter 2, I'd probably gone through 60 or 70 times because it was originally chapter 1. And I always spend perhaps way too much time on chapter 1, but it's killer, it's important, so I do. But the research, if you make mistakes in your research, it will kill the book. Somebody's going to raise the issue right away, and that will just ruin any authenticism and that's involved. And then that's that. So research and then research again. And then when I'm reading it, as I'm sitting back there and I've got it sitting here in front of me, printed out, I say, oh, wait a minute, maybe I should be looking this up right here a little more, or maybe I need a picture of this. And I do those things. And sometimes I avoid making stupid mistakes that way.
I mean, it's one thing to do all the research and not get pulled down the rabbit hole in some of these things that probably strike your fancy as you're doing research and trying to sort through the facts and the events that are important to the narrative line that you're writing. But how do you, first of all, okay, how do you do that? And secondly, how do you make it readable? Because facts are facts and it could be a textbook, but you're not writing a textbook. No. So how do you do that?
Well, first of all, you got to understand, I've got about 100 pages of notes and hours of tapes that I have to go through and make an outline. And then I check off each thing as I get it into the outline, because the outline, those notes are over a period of numerous interviews. So the outline has to follow chronological flow. Once I've got that done, then I'm prepared to sit down and write a draft. And as I do so, I share every few chapters, I share it with my subject, and he gets to go through it, and then we go through it together, and then I proceed forward. Timing, pacing. No matter, I learned a lesson in 8th grade that stayed with me to this day. How to do a book report. I did mine on the fall of Constantinople, which was released that year, and had an incredible amount of detail, all of which went into my book report. Instead of being 2 pages, it turned out to be 12. I'm expecting an A+. I get it back from the teacher. She's got B+ on there. I was floored. I said, Miss Chamberlain, look at this. She said, well, I appreciate your effort, but there were just so many facts and figures in here that I got bogged down. A lesson that I learned in 8th grade, and I bear that in mind, because especially with something like Midnight Flight to Nuremberg, where he's going through the entire process of enlisting in the Army Air Corps and then going through all the sequences you have to go through to become a pilot. There's a lot of stuff there that can bog down. So there are things that I actually would cut out. And then, of course, interactions between him and his best friend, and then the story of how he met the woman who would become his wife, and then he and his best friend and their 2 fiancés get married the day they graduate with their second lieutenant's commissions. Those get interweaved into the process, which helps keep things moving along. And the pictures. The pictures.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Got to have pictures. Yeah. You can pick out almost any page, and there's pictures. And here's a pretty boring couple pictures in one respect, but in the other respect, they're tied in to what you're reading. So now you're seeing what he's flying, and it just helps.
I'm curious. You were talking earlier about the success that the book has had in Europe.
Yes.
and we are bumping up against our timeline, but I am curious, why is it that it seems like the World War, or does it seem like World War II books and books on World War II seem to do so well still today in Europe?
They have never forgotten World War II. Almost anywhere you go, there's evidence somewhere of the war, physical evidence, and they sell. In Holland, they went nuts. They sold out of the book at the local bookstores over and over again, leading up to the annual celebration of the Market Garden. In fact, the Dutch government brought the subject of my book and his wife to Holland, first class, for a week of celebrations there, which is where Prince Charles walked up to him holding the book and asked him to sign it for him.
That must have been a thrill for you.
Yeah, that was nice. And all these, everybody who was anybody was at one of the events. And boy, to this day, it's still a bestseller. And of course, in September, that book gets a recharge in sales over there, because September is when Market Garden was, and that's really the subject of the book. And Midnight Flight to Nuremberg is also World War II. And just the title, Nuremberg, there still, even today, is in the headlines because of the Nuremberg war trials.
Right.
There's a picture of him at the war, sitting in the witness stand at the war trials. So that helps.
So just so people have an idea, who do you think these books would appeal to? And then what do you hope that people take away from the books that you write?
Unhesitating valor, courage, depth of character, and never losing sight of their objectives. Whether it was in either book, each person had significant hurdles to overcome and faced danger practically on a daily basis. Feeling what they felt would make them want to read another book about World War II. I've spoken to a couple of classes up in the Phoenix area, 8th, 7th, and 8th graders. They went home and asked their parents to buy the book. See, it's literally, it's in libraries quite often, because Midwest Book Review always reviews these books. They always take mine for whatever reason. They take it and it goes in their library book watch. So it goes in the libraries, which is really important. But I write at an 8th grade level or less. A lesson learned from Dr. Richard S. Carlson, my mentor and journalism professor in college. He had written a book called The Benign Humorist. I have one of the rare copies of it. He said, learn a lesson from me. I wrote at the level of my education, and he was quite educated. Don't do that. Write for everybody out there so they can understand it. Write like you write for the newspaper, because I was writing for the newspaper. So that's what I do with my books. I write where I specifically will take out highfalutin words.
So not only adults would appreciate this, you might actually find younger people who would appreciate this as well.
Yeah. It's definitely, young adults would have no problems with these books. And the pacing, like I said, is something that I always work on. Whether it's a magazine story or a book, if the pacing isn't consistent, the reader will start to wander and look around, and next thing you know, they put a bookmark in and it's set over to the side and never to be read again.
So, I mean, it sounds fascinating, Marcus, all the books and your approach and your reverence, and you can sense the sense of responsibility you feel for getting the historical accuracy of the events into the books. I think people would appreciate that and be interested in that. So where can they find your books? How can they get a hold of them?
Right now, it's on sale on Amazon. They've reduced the price dramatically. It was in court. It was with an event that they were sponsoring on the East Coast. They lowered the price of Midnight Flight to like half off. So Amazon is the least expensive way. I found it at Barnes and Noble here in the Oro Valley bookstore, and it's in other bookstores. Because I know most of those bookstores seem to be in Australia, Japan, the EU, India. In fact, I get hits from those countries on my website every single day. And I don't even know what's bringing them there, but they're finding it. And my opinion is history well written is basically like writing a thriller. And there are plenty of thrilling aspects in these books. The key is getting the reader to those aspects so they can get into them and then keep wanting to move on with the story.
Keep them wanting more works for fiction or nonfiction. So that's great. Okay, Marcus, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Maddie. I appreciate it very much. And
we
thanks,
wish you
Larry.
a lot of luck. We didn't get a chance to talk about the books that you're working on, but maybe
No
you'll
problem.
come back.
Well, I work from home, so it's not a hard thing for me to do.
Okay, well, that's good. We know where basically you live. So
Yeah.
we'll be back in touch with you when those books do finally get out to the public. And congratulations on the success of the books. And it sounds like there's so much hard work that went into it. So you deserve it.
Thank you. Well, tomorrow my queries start for the 2 new books.
So back to the real world, right?
Yes, exactly. All right.
Well,
Appreciate
thank
it
you
very
again.
much. I miss seeing you all you guys. The COVID was horrible, just horrible.
Well, hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
And for everybody who joined us on Facebook or YouTube, thank you very much. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. If you're looking for a free copy, an edited copy of this video and other videos like it, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is SCWA Writers Online, to find this interview and other interviews. So we hope that you keep reading and keep writing and stay safe until the next time.